What was life like for you and your family?
You tell some of that, and I'll come in later. Do you think your life was worse during the war than it was any other time?
Well, I'll put it this way, it was a little better, but not much.
Better? In what way?
I don't know.
The thing that I was most aware of was the fact that just about everything you wanted was rationed.
Yeah. We had stamps to buy, or a letter to buy gas, and you had to get stamps for groceries, and they call it relief then. It's like what do they call it now?
More like unemployment, or the same kind of thing as unemployment and stuff now, but everything was rationed. You had to have like for tires for your car and for gas, and you'd have to have tokens and pages of stamps for so much to buy so much. Meat was rationed, sugar was rationed, butter was rationed.
Of course, it wasn't butter that they had. It was a block of, I always call it
Margarine.
lard. And you had a little yellow stuff you mixed up with your hands.
If you didn't have enough meat stamps, you couldn't get the meat you wanted. If you didn't have enough sugar stamps, you couldn't get the sugar that you needed. Like almost everything then was home canned. We ate fruit at every meal, and in order to can the fruit, like peaches and plums and grapes and all that kind of stuff, you had to have some kind of sweetening in it, because otherwise it would go just completely bad and you couldn't eat it at all. But you had to, they'd say, don't hoard your stamps, don't hoard your stamps. Well, if you didn't, you couldn't get the sugar, the amount, enough sugar at the time you wanted to, the time that the stuff was ready to be canned.
Most of the people back then raised their own gardens and their own fruit.
Oh yeah, you had your own gardens and fruit
potatoes,
and everything.
I think we had, well, I'd say pretty close to 2 acres of garden that we raised, and us boys took care of it.
What about like clothing and stuff? Like,
Mostly we had hand-me-downs. Leather was another thing that was rationed, because they used most of the available leather, new leather, to make boots and stuff for the soldiers. So I know that during the summer, us kids mostly went barefoot. And just before school was ready to start, my dad insisted that we be home so that he could fit us all with shoes to start school with. And they were all hand-me-downs from somebody else in the family, cousins. You know, they'd all get together and, oh, I've got a pair of shoes that should fit her, and oh, there's a pair of shoes that should fit my kid, and then my dad would take them, he'd fit them on each one of us so that we'd each one have a pair of shoes. They might not be what we wanted for school, but they'd look decent anyway. And he'd take them over to the shoe shop in Eddyville, and they'd put new soles and heels and new insoles, new liners inside of them, and new shoelaces, and the guy would dye them like if you had a pair of brown shoes that were all scuffed and everything, he'd use a heavy dye to make them look like new. And then I'd wear what was probably a boy's shoe to school, but I wasn't the only one, so.
My dad used to put heels and soles on our shoes. And
He had
them little things you put the shoes on.
called a last.
Yeah, and so that's how we got them.
But they had a lot more boys than we did. There were mostly girls in our family till John, all girls in our family till John came along.
Okay.